The assignment. The dragon statue reeked of ancient dust and forgotten glory, its scales crusted with centuries of grime that whispered untold stories. Emperor Zalgak VII of the Hexopian Empire adjusted his 15-layered ceremonial robe, already stained with remnants of his morning feast of iridescent slug eggs. The purple-skinned monarch gestured grandly toward the enclosure where the once magnificent beast stood frozen in permanent mild aggression, its amber eyes dulled by time and neglect. "Behold the guardian of everlasting vigilance," Zalgak announced to the small gathering of courtiers, each wearing expressions ranging from forced reverence to barely concealed boredom. For 7,213 standard galactic years, this mighty creature has protected our imperial palace from the forces of chaos and disorder. The court historian, a thin creature with 8 eyes arranged in a perfect octagon, coughed politely. "Actually, Your Magnificence, the records indicate it has been 7,213 years and 4 months since." "Silence," roared the Emperor, his facial tentacles quivering with irritation. I round down for dramatic effect. From the back of the crowd emerged an unlikely figure, a human male in his early 30s wearing the gray jumpsuit of palace maintenance staff. He carried a simple bucket filled with cleaning supplies and looked entirely out of place among the elaborately dressed alien dignitaries. His brown hair was disheveled, and he'd clearly been summoned in haste, evidenced by the half-eaten protein bar still clutched in his free hand. "You requested janitorial services, Your Magnificence," the human asked, bowing awkwardly while trying not to spill his bucket's contents. Emperor Zalgak's upper lip curled into what might have been a smile on a human face but resembled a painful grimace on his alien visage. "Ah yes, the Earth creature. What was your designation again?" "Devon, sir." "Devon Powell." "Yes, creature Devon. You have been selected for a task of great honor," the Emperor proclaimed, his robes now sporting a fresh stain from his excited gesticulation. A holographic projection flickered to life beside him, displaying a partially obscured image of what appeared to be the same dragon, but vibrant, alive, and remarkably clean. The image was fuzzy, showing only about 40% of the full picture with the file title conspicuously blurred. "Our most sacred guardian requires attention," the Emperor continued. "The Imperial Draconic Preservation Committee has determined that its current state is inadequate for the upcoming Festival of Eternal Allegiance." Devon stepped closer to the enclosure, eyeing the dragon statue critically. It wasn't a statue at all, he realized with a start. The layers of filth, a complex mixture of dust, atmospheric pollution, bird-like droppings from native flying reptiles, and what appeared to be deliberate applications of ritual oils and paints, had created a shell around what was obviously once a living creature. The dragon's nostrils occasionally twitched almost imperceptibly, releasing tiny puffs of ancient dust that danced in the slanting beams of artificial light. "With all due respect, Your Magnificence," Devon said carefully, "this isn't a cleaning job. This is cruelty. This dragon isn't a statue, it's been immobilized somehow, and it looks like it hasn't been properly cared for in, 7,000 years." The Emperor's facial tentacles writhed in what might have been embarrassment or indignation. Devon had never quite mastered Hexopian facial expressions. "The Guardian does not require your Earth creature sympathy," the Emperor declared. "It requires only your cleaning abilities. We have observed that humans possess an unusual affinity for restoration activities." Devon sighed. He'd been stuck on this alien world for 3 years now, ever since his research vessel had malfunctioned and crash-landed on what turned out to be the Emperor's private zoo. Instead of being executed for trespassing, he'd been assigned to the maintenance staff, where his human dexterity and problem-solving skills were apparently considered useful. The Hexopians, with their tentacle-like appendages, struggled with certain fine motor tasks that humans found trivial. "Fine," he said, approaching the enclosure. "But I'll need better supplies than this if you want results. And I'll need access to information about dragon physiology, I don't want to damage it." The nearest court official, a being that resembled a cross between a flamingo and a jellyfish, floated forward with a dusty manual. "The ancient texts speak of a ritual called the cleansing of the guardian as the proper method of restoration. It is most auspicious that you, a human, have been selected for this task. Devon accepted the manual with a raised eyebrow. That's oddly specific. And it sounds more like a punishment than a ritual. The flamingo jellyfish creature's translucent body pulsed with what might have been indignation. The ancient ways are not for us to question, Earth creature. The ritual has been performed only 3 times in our recorded history, and each time by a human captive, honored guest, of the Empire. Devon said skeptically. And what happened to these other humans after they completed the ritual? The creature's gelatinous body shimmered uncomfortably. They were, appropriately honored for their service to the Empire. Which means? The records are unclear, the official said evasively. Now please proceed. The festival approaches, and the Guardian must be presentable. Nevertheless, Devon opened the enclosure door and stepped inside, armed with his bucket of cleaning supplies. The dragon's eyes followed him, and there was intelligence there, weary perhaps, resigned, but definitely conscious. Devon reached out hesitantly and touched one filthy scale. The texture beneath the layers of grime was smooth and warm. The dragon's nostrils flared slightly, releasing another small cloud of dust that tickled Devon's nose, carrying an ancient, musky odor that reminded him oddly of old books and thunderstorms. "Hello there," he whispered, too quietly for the watching court to hear. "Don't worry. I'm going to help you." First contact. As Devon's fingers made contact with the dragon's hide, something unexpected happened. A tiny spark of blue electricity arced between them, and the scale beneath his fingertip seemed to shift slightly, as if the creature had taken its first breath in millennia. The dust around the contact point swirled in miniature eddies, forming patterns too complex to be random. The court fell silent, watching with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Devon continued carefully, applying a small amount of cleaning solution to a cloth and gently wiping a small section of the dragon's foreleg. Beneath the caked-on filth emerged a scale of brilliant emerald, shimmering with an inner light that had been hidden for thousands of years. "Remarkable," murmured the court historian, scribbling notes furiously. The texts indeed mention this response to the ritual touch. "Most fascinating." Devon glanced at the historian. "You said this ritual has been performed 3 times before. What exactly is supposed to happen when it's completed?" The historian adjusted his spectacles, which perched precariously between his 3rd and 4th eyes. "The Guardian awakens fully to receive the Emperor's blessing, of course. It then returns to its vigilant slumber until the next ritual cleansing is required." But something about the way the other courtiers exchanged glances made Devon suspect there was more to the story than he was being told. Over the next several days, Devon returned to the enclosure, gradually cleaning more and more of the dragon's body. With each session, he discovered new details about the magnificent creature. There was a complex pattern of interlocking metallic components beneath some of the scales, not natural, but clearly technological. Some kind of restraint system, perhaps, or a control mechanism. And with each cleaning, the dragon seemed more alert, more present. By the 3rd day, Devon had established a routine. He would arrive early in the morning before most of the court was awake and work for several hours in relative solitude. The dragon appeared to appreciate this quieter time, its breathing became more regular, and occasionally its tail would twitch slightly when Devon addressed it directly, which he found himself doing with increasing frequency. "You know," Devon said conversationally on the 4th day as he carefully cleaned around one massive eye, "I think they've forgotten what you really are. They talk about you like you're some kind of religious icon, but you're an actual living being, aren't you?" The dragon blinked slowly, deliberately. "I thought so," Devon continued, switching to a softer brush for the delicate area. "And I don't think you're just a pet or a guardian either. There's something else going on here." The dragon's eye focused on him with startling clarity, and its jaw moved slightly, the first substantial movement Devon had observed. A rasping sound emerged, like stone grinding against metal. "Did you just try to speak?" Devon asked, surprised. The creature attempted another movement, dislodging a cascade of dust from its neck that swirled around them both in a miniature dust storm, catching the morning light like a cloud of tiny stars. Well, well, Devon said with a small smile. Looks like the Guardian of Everlasting Vigilance might have some things to say after all. Let's get your voice back, shall we? That afternoon, a group of high-ranking military officials visited the enclosure. They observed Devon's work with expressions of poorly concealed concern, whispering among themselves in the guttural clicks and whistles of high Hexopian dialect that Devon's translator couldn't quite parse. The human makes excessive progress, one officer said to another, apparently unaware that Devon could understand at least some of their conversation. The awakening was not scheduled for another 14 cycles. The Emperor insists, replied another, this one decorated with the insignia of what Devon had learned was the Imperial Security Division. The live streaming numbers for the festival must exceed last cycle's record. The cleansing ritual has proven most engaging for viewers. The first officer's tentacles twisted in the gesture Devon had come to recognize as profound disapproval. And when the control mantle fails? What then? It will not fail, the security officer insisted. The primary junction remains secure, and even if the system were to malfunction, we have contingencies. They departed shortly afterward, leaving Devon to wonder what exactly these contingencies might be. More importantly, he now had confirmation that the metallic components he had discovered were indeed a control system of some kind. By the fifth day, Devon had cleaned roughly a third of the dragon's body, revealing a magnificent pattern of scales that shifted color depending on the angle of light, emerald to sapphire to amber and back again. The dragon's movements, though still limited, had become more frequent. Its tail would occasionally sweep a small arc across the floor, sending clouds of ancient dust into the air. Its wings, still mostly covered in grime, would sometimes flex slightly, causing the metallic restraints to creak in protest. The court's interest had intensified, with larger crowds gathering to watch Devon work. The Emperor himself had taken to observing the proceedings for an hour each afternoon, seated on a portable throne that creaked under his considerable bulk. Magnificent progress, creature Devon, the Emperor declared during one such visit. The Guardian grows more beautiful with each passing day. Soon it will be ready for the Grand Awakening ceremony. Grand Awakening ceremony? Devon asked, pausing in his work. Oh yes, the Emperor said, his tentacles writhing with excitement. A spectacle broadcast across the entire empire. Millions will witness the Guardians return to consciousness under our benevolent rule. It will be, most profitable. Devon felt a chill run down his spine. Something about the Emperor's tone suggested that the dragon's awakening might not be the peaceful ceremony he described. Uncovering truth. That evening, Devon couldn't shake his growing unease. He made his way to the palace archives, a vast repository of data crystals and ancient scrolls that chronicled the Empire's history. Most maintenance staff weren't allowed access, but Devon had earned certain privileges during his 3 years of service. The archive keeper, an elderly Hexopian with failing eyesight, barely looked up as Devon entered. Research on the Guardian? He asked without preamble. How did you? Word travels fast in the palace, human. You're not the first to come asking questions. The keeper's tentacles moved with surprising agility, pulling several data crystals from their storage matrices. These contain the records of the previous cleansing rituals. Perhaps they will satisfy your curiosity. Devon took the crystals to a reading station and began to access their contents. What he found made his blood run cold. The first ritual, performed 2,400 years ago by a human named Sarah Chen, had indeed resulted in the dragon's temporary awakening. But the records showed that within hours of the ceremony, both Sarah and the dragon had vanished. The official report claimed they had transcended to a higher plane of existence, but a classified military addendum suggested something far more sinister, that Sarah had somehow freed the dragon, and both had been eliminated by Imperial security forces. The second ritual, 1,200 years later, had ended similarly. A human engineer named Marcus Webb had awakened the dragon, only for both to disappear during the night. This time, the military records were more explicit: containment breach. Subjects terminated. Cover story: Divine Ascension. The third ritual, just 300 years ago, had been different. The human, a woman named Elena Vasquez, had apparently been more cautious. She had awakened the dragon partially but had managed to maintain the control systems. Elena had lived for several more years as a honored guest of the Empire, essentially a prisoner, before dying under mysterious circumstances. Devon's hands trembled as he read the final entry in Elena's personal log, smuggled out by a sympathetic palace worker. They don't understand what they're doing. The dragon isn't just a guardian, it's a prisoner of war. The last survivor of a race that once ruled this entire sector. The Hexopians conquered them through treachery and have kept this one as a trophy for over 7 millennia. If I can find a way to free it. The log ended there. Devon sat back in his chair, the full weight of the situation crashing down on him. He wasn't just cleaning a statue, he was unwittingly participating in the continued torture of an intelligent being whose people had been genocided by the Hexopian Empire. The next morning, Devon approached the dragon's enclosure with new eyes. As he began his work, he spoke quietly to the ancient creature. "I know what you are now," he whispered as he cleaned around the dragon's massive head. "I know what they did to your people." The dragon's eyes, now mostly clear of grime, fixed on him with an intensity that made Devon's breath catch. There was pain there, yes, but also something else, hope. "I want to help you," Devon continued, "but I don't know how. The control system, I can see the metallic components, but I don't understand how they work." The dragon's jaw moved again, and this time a sound emerged, not quite words, but something close. The voice was like grinding stone mixed with distant thunder, and Devon had to strain to make out what might have been, junction, behind, left wing. Devon's eyes widened. "You can speak." "Little, very, tired." The dragon managed, each word clearly an enormous effort. "Don't strain yourself," Devon said quickly. "Save your strength. Just tell me, the junction behind your left wing, is that part of the control system?" A barely perceptible nod. "If I remove it, will you be free?" The dragon's eyes closed for a long moment, then opened again. "Dangerous, for you, they will kill." "Let me worry about that," Devon said, though his heart was racing. "Can you tell me how to disable it?" Over the next hour, communicating through gestures, nods, and occasional whispered words, the dragon managed to convey the basics of the control system. It was more complex than Devon had imagined, not just a physical restraint, but a neural inhibitor that suppressed the dragon's natural abilities. The junction behind the left wing was indeed a critical component, but removing it would trigger alarms throughout the palace. "We need a distraction," Devon mused. "Something big enough to keep everyone busy while I work on the junction." The dragon's eyes glittered with what might have been amusement. "Tomorrow, festival, many visitors." Devon realized what the dragon was suggesting. The Festival of Eternal Allegiance would bring thousands of visitors to the palace, including dignitaries from across the empire. The chaos and crowds would provide perfect cover for his work. But first, he needed to understand exactly what would happen when the dragon was freed. The palace archives had been vague about the dragon's capabilities, but Devon suspected there was a reason the Hexopians had gone to such elaborate lengths to keep it imprisoned. "What will you do if I free you?" he asked quietly. The dragon was silent for a long moment, then spoke with more clarity than before, "Justice, for my people, and those who helped me." Devon felt a chill. "You mean the other humans? Sarah, Marcus, Elena? Remember, all of them, remember, their kindness. And the Hexopians?" The dragon's eyes blazed with inner fire. 7,000 years of imprisonment, they will answer. Devon swallowed hard. He was beginning to understand that freeing this dragon wouldn't just be an act of compassion, it would be an act of war. The Awakening. The Festival of Eternal Allegiance dawned with all the pageantry the Hexopian Empire could muster. Thousands of visitors from across the galaxy crowded the palace grounds, while millions more watched via holographic broadcasts. Devon had barely slept, his mind racing through the plan he and the dragon had developed over whispered conversations. The Grand Awakening ceremony was scheduled for midday, when the crowds would be at their largest. Devon had positioned his tools carefully, not just cleaning supplies, but a small plasma cutter he'd requisitioned under the guise of removing stubborn mineral deposits from the dragon's scales. Emperor Zalgak arrived in his most elaborate ceremonial robes, accompanied by the full court and several dozen news drones that buzzed around the enclosure like metallic insects. The emperor's speech was lengthy and bombastic, praising the empire's wisdom in maintaining such an ancient guardian and promising the assembled crowds a spectacle they would never forget. And now, the emperor declared, his voice booming across the palace grounds, witness the awakening of our most sacred protector. Devon had been gradually cleaning away the last layers of grime from the dragon's body over the past few days, but he had deliberately left the control junction concealed beneath a thin layer of dust. As the ceremony began, he made a show of applying cleaning solution to the area, his movements concealing the fact that he was actually positioning the plasma cutter. The dragon lay still, but Devon could sense the tension in its massive form. They would have only moments once the junction was severed before alarms began sounding. "Behold!" Emperor Zalgak cried. As the sacred cleansing reaches completion, the guardian stirs. Devon pressed the plasma cutter against the hidden junction and activated it. There was a brief flash of sparks, hidden by the dragon's body from the watching crowd, and suddenly the ancient creature drew its first truly free breath in over 7 millennia. The change was immediate and dramatic. The dragon's eyes blazed with inner fire, its scales shifting through a spectrum of colors that made the watching crowd gasp in awe. Its wings, still partially covered by ceremonial restraints, began to flex with increasing strength. For a moment, Devon thought they might actually succeed in the charade. The crowd was cheering, the emperor was preening, and the dragon was playing its part perfectly, moving just enough to seem awakened but not enough to alarm anyone. Then the security alarms began to wail. "Containment breach," someone shouted from the crowd of officials. "The primary junction has been severed." Emperor Zalgak's expression of triumph melted into one of panic as he realized what was happening. "Activate the backup restraints," he screamed. "Deploy security forces." But it was too late. The dragon rose to its full height for the first time in millennia, its head brushing against the energy barrier that formed the enclosure's ceiling. The barrier sparked and failed under the creature's growing power. "My people," the dragon spoke, its voice now clear and strong, carrying across the entire palace grounds. 7,000 years ago, you conquered my world through treachery. You slaughtered my kind and kept me as a trophy of your victory." The crowd fell silent, the festive atmosphere evaporating like morning mist. "But in your arrogance, you made one crucial mistake," the dragon continued, its eyes fixed on the cowering emperor. "You allowed humans to care for me. And humans, unlike your species, understand compassion." Devon backed away as the dragon's form began to glow with increasing intensity. The creature was drawing power from somewhere, perhaps from the planet itself, or from reserves it had been hoarding for millennia. "Wait!" Devon called out. "What about the innocents? The people who had nothing to do with what happened to your people?" The dragon turned its great head toward him, and Devon saw recognition and gratitude in those ancient eyes. "Your concern honors you, Devon Powell. But justice does not require the destruction of all, only those who perpetuate the crime." Imperial security forces were pouring into the area now, armed with energy weapons and neural disruptors. They opened fire on the dragon, but their weapons seemed to have little effect. The creature's scales deflected their attacks like armor, while its growing aura of power interfered with their electronic systems. "You 3 years ago," the dragon said, its voice carrying even over the chaos of the battle, "you showed me kindness when you could have simply completed your task and walked away. You chose to see me as a being worthy of freedom rather than a relic to be maintained. What will you do now?" Devon asked, ducking as an energy bolt sizzled past his head. "What I should have done 7,000 years ago," the dragon replied. "I will reclaim my people's rightful place in this galaxy. But first, I will ensure that those who helped me are safe." The dragon's eyes flared, and suddenly Devon felt himself surrounded by a bubble of protective energy. Similar bubbles appeared around other figures in the crowd, maintenance workers, junior officials, and others who had shown the dragon small kindnesses during his imprisonment. The archive keeper who allowed you access to the records, the dragon explained. The kitchen worker who sometimes left fresh fruit near my enclosure. The young courtier who always bowed respectfully rather than treating me as mere decoration. They will be spared what comes next. And what comes next? Devon asked, though he suspected he already knew. The dragon's form was growing brighter now, its power building towards some kind of climax. The Hexopian Empire built its strength on the bones of conquered worlds. It sustained itself through oppression and slavery. That ends today. But the innocent people, citizens who never had a choice in their government's actions, will have the opportunity to build something better from what remains, the dragon said. Justice, Devon Powell, is not the same as revenge. I learned that distinction from watching humans like you. Emperor Zalgak, still cowering behind his portable throne, tried one last desperate gambit. You cannot destroy the empire. We are too vast, too powerful. Kill me if you must, but you cannot undo 7,000 years of civilization. The dragon's laugh was like distant thunder. Watch me. Freedom's price. What happened next would be remembered across the galaxy for millennia to come. The dragon didn't simply destroy the palace or even the planet. Instead, its power reached out across space, touching every world under Hexopian rule. On each planet, the same scene played out. Oppressive governments found their weapons failing, their communication networks overloaded with messages of liberation, their ability to enforce tyranny simply gone. Devon watched through the protective barrier as the dragon's power worked its will. He could see holographic displays throughout the palace showing the collapse of imperial authority across dozens of worlds. But remarkably, there was little actual violence. The dragon's power seemed focused on dismantling systems of oppression rather than causing mass destruction. You're freeing all the conquered worlds, Devon said in amazement. My people believed that freedom was the birthright of all intelligent species, the dragon replied, its voice now echoing with harmonics that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The Hexopians forgot that lesson. I am simply reminding them. Emperor Zalgak and his inner circle had huddled together near the collapsed throne, their elaborate robes now torn and stained with dust. The emperor's tentacles writhed with rage and fear as he watched his empire crumble in real time. This is madness, he screamed. You'll bring chaos to the entire sector. I bring choice, the dragon corrected. For the first time in millennia, every world will be free to determine its own destiny. Some may choose chaos, yes. Others will choose peace. Most will probably choose something in between. But it will be their choice. The protective bubbles around Devon and the others began to glow more brightly, and he realized they were being transported. The palace grounds fell away beneath them as they rose into the sky, carried by the dragon's power. Where are we going? Devon asked. Somewhere safe, the dragon replied. The palace will not survive what comes next. They watched from high above as the dragon's true form was finally revealed. No longer confined by the enclosure or weakened by millennia of imprisonment, the creature expanded until it seemed to fill half the sky. Its scales blazed with the light of stars, and its wings cast shadows across entire continents. But even as it grew, the dragon maintained careful control. Devon could see evacuation ships lifting off from the palace and surrounding cities, carrying civilians to safety. The dragon's power was terrifying in its scope, but precise in its application. The humans who helped me before, the dragon said, its voice now like the whisper of solar winds, Sarah, Marcus, Elena, they tried to free me, but the technology of their time was insufficient. They died for their compassion. You succeeded where they failed. What happens to us now? Devon asked. To the people you saved. You will have choices, the dragon said. I can return you to Earth, if you wish. Or you can help me rebuild what was destroyed. The galaxy will need leaders who understand both justice and mercy. Devon looked around at his fellow survivors, the archive keeper, the kitchen worker, the young courtier, and dozens of others. They were a diverse group, but they all shared something in common: they had shown kindness when it would have been easier to remain indifferent. Below them, the palace was beginning to crack and crumble, but not from destruction, from transformation. The dragon's power was reshaping it, turning the symbol of oppression into something new. Gardens began to sprout from the ruins, and flowing water carved new channels through what had once been throne rooms and torture chambers. The Empire is truly over? Devon asked. The Empire, yes. But not the people. Those who can learn to live without oppressing others will thrive. Those who cannot. The dragon's tone grew colder. We'll find the galaxy has become a much smaller place for tyrants. As they watched, ships began arriving from across the galaxy, not warships, but vessels carrying representatives from worlds that had been under Hexopian rule. They came seeking answers, seeking guidance, seeking a new way forward. And you? Devon asked. What will you do now? The dragon was already beginning to diminish, its cosmic form condensing back towards something more manageable. I will do what my people always did, guide and protect, but not rule. The age of empires is ending, Devon Powell. The age of cooperation is beginning. Because of what we did today. Because of what you chose to do, the dragon corrected. You had a simple task: clean a statue for a festival. Instead, you chose to see the being beneath the grime. You chose compassion over compliance. That choice changed everything. Devon felt the protective bubble beginning to lower them back toward the transformed palace grounds. Around him, the other survivors were marveling at the changes taking place. Where once there had been cold stone and metal, there were now living spaces designed for comfort and community rather than intimidation and control. Will I see you again? Devon asked as they touched down. The dragon, now back to a more manageable size, though still magnificent, settled beside them with a sound like gentle thunder. Often, I suspect. There is much work to be done, and I find that humans have a talent for asking the right questions at the right time. Devon smiled, looking around at the transformed world beginning to take shape around them. Ships from dozens of worlds were landing nearby, their crews stepping out to witness the birth of something unprecedented, a galactic community based on freedom rather than force. Just promise me one thing, Devon said to the dragon. What is that? Next time someone asks me to do a simple cleaning job, remind me to read the fine print first. The dragon's laugh rolled across the landscape like distant thunder, and for the first time in 7,000 years, it was a sound of pure joy. Years later, when historians tried to explain how a single human janitor had sparked the transformation of an entire galactic civilization, they would struggle to understand the deeper truth, that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't technology or magic or ancient power, it's simply the choice to treat another being with kindness. Devon Powell went on to become one of the founding members of the Galactic Council of Free Worlds, a democratic body that replaced the authoritarian empire. The dragon, who eventually revealed its true name as Thyrolax the Last, served as an advisor and guardian, ensuring that no single world or species could dominate the others as the Hexopians once had. The archive keeper became the first director of the Galactic Historical Preservation Society, dedicated to ensuring that the crimes of the past would never be forgotten or repeated. The kitchen worker established a network of relief stations that provided aid to refugees from worlds still recovering from imperial rule. The young courtier helped draft the Charter of Species Rights that became the foundation of interstellar law. Emperor Zolgak VII, stripped of power but not executed, spent his remaining years in a comfortable exile on a small agricultural world, tending to gardens under the supervision of former slaves his empire had oppressed. Some said it was too merciful a fate. Others argued it was the perfect punishment for someone who had spent his life surrounded by artificial luxury, to finally understand the value of honest work and simple living. The Festival of Eternal Allegiance was never held again, but a new celebration took its place, Liberation Day, observed across hundreds of worlds as beings of all species gathered to remember that freedom was not a gift to be granted by rulers, but a right to be claimed by the courageous. And in a small museum on the world that had once been the heart of the Hexopian Empire, visitors could see a simple maintenance bucket and cleaning cloth, displayed beneath a plaque that read, "Sometimes the greatest revolutions begin with the smallest acts of kindness." The dragon had been right, the age of empires was over. The age of cooperation had begun. And it all started with one human who chose to see a person where others saw only a statue. Devon often visited that museum, especially on quiet days when he needed to remember why he had made the choice that changed everything. He would stand before the display and think about the three humans who had tried before him, Sarah, Marcus, and Elena, whose courage had paved the way for his success. The galaxy was far from perfect. There were still conflicts, still injustices, still worlds where beings struggled for basic dignity. But now there was hope. Now there were choices. Now there was a voice for those who had been silenced for too long. And watching over it all, with wisdom earned through 7 millennia of suffering and the compassion learned from human friends, Thyrilax the Last continued his vigil, not as an imprisoned guardian of an empire, but as a free protector of all who sought to live in peace. The last entry in Devon's personal log, written 50 years after that fateful festival day, read simply, "Today I taught my granddaughter how to clean properly. I told her it's not just about removing dirt, it's about revealing the beauty that was always there, waiting to be discovered. She understood immediately. I think the galaxy is in good hands." The end.